Okay, thanks very much, Russ. Well, firstly, thanks very much for the invitation to participate. I managed to listen to some of the earlier presentations, and I think certainly some of the issues, particularly around the admission of electronic evidence in court proceedings, are quite apposite, actually, in terms of perhaps some of the things that I have to say this afternoon. I sort of titled this presentation, "You Really Don't Have to Reinvent the Wheel." And the background to that really is that I've worked with a number of international organisations over the years, and am still doing so. And every time somebody speaks from the organisation, they say, we're not going to reinvent the wheel and we're not going to duplicate effort. And you speak to them about 6 months later and they've done exactly that. So I think there's just an opportunity. I wanted to take the opportunity perhaps to discuss some initiatives that are out there, by no means all of them, just some of those that I've been lucky enough to be involved in and which transcend international borders. And I hope that they'll be of some value to your project. So this splits into three areas really, and there are three separate slides. Three separate sets of slides, which you may find contradictory when I'm saying people should cooperate with each other, but every one of the organisations has its own structure and logos, and I thought I'd respect that whilst perhaps creating some of the links between them. What I would say is that the presentation is very much around cybercrime, capacity building against cybercrime, rather than some of the more technical features of cybersecurity, although it's clear that most cybersecurity issues are also cybercrime, but not all cybercrimes are cybersecurity issues. So I'm concentrating very much on the cybercrime aspect. Three things I'm going to speak about today. One is a group called the European Cybercrime Training and Education Group, ECTEG. I just came back from a meeting from The Hague last night of that particular group. The second, I'm going to talk about a project called 2Centre, which is the Cybercrime Centres of Excellence for Training, Research and Education. It was a project that ran until September of this year. I'll talk something about that and the principles behind that, and perhaps how some of the thinking may be relevant. And then finally, I'm going to refer to some work that's been conducted by the Council of Europe and the production of an electronic evidence guide, which may go back to some of the things that Kay was talking about earlier in the admissibility of evidence, and I'll explain a bit more about that. So starting off with ECTEG, if you could move on to the next slide, please. ECTEG is what it says on there. It's a European Cybercrime Training and Education Group, and it's actually an ad hoc group that meets at Europol twice a year to discuss needs and requirements for training, but it doesn't only discuss them, it actually goes ahead and looks to develop products, and I'll show you some of the products that there are in a minute. It's composed of participants from the European Union member states and also the candidate countries. The law enforcement agencies are the primary partners, but also involved are international bodies such as UNODC, Council of Europe, OSCE. Yesterday, the International Criminal Court were at our meeting because they're considering aspects around electronic or digital evidence as well. And importantly, academia and private industry also participate. Next slide, please. I've put this up. I'm not going to go through this. It's there in case anybody wants to go back and see how this came about in the first instance. But in broad terms, about 10 or 11 years ago, a group of us, sort of like-minded people really from different countries, got together because we recognised that it wasn't necessary for each individual country to develop its own cybercrime training solutions, because most of them transcended international borders in terms of the investigative and the forensic processes. So over a number of years, we applied for funding to develop a series of training courses. And when I say develop the courses, what I mean is we developed full training packs, so including all the training materials plus carefully structured training packs incorporating aims, objectives, and all of those other things that you associate with training. Next slide, please. So what happened was it became quite burdensome in the end for the people working individually, and so after 4 of these projects, we asked Europol whether they would take a coordination role in respect of these activities, because at that time it very much relied upon individuals, and individuals move on. And so Europol did agree to do that, and the ad hoc group was created and changed its name back in 2009 to ECTEG. And I think mainly the reason for that was it had vowels in the right place for an acronym, which is very unusual. But it says it does what it says on the can. It's a European Cybercrime Training and Education Group, and crucially in there is the word education, because one of the key principles that we worked to was that we didn't want just the law enforcement community to say, well, we think we know best and we think that we can develop good training courses. We wanted some academic rigour attached to them, and so we worked with a number of universities. Primarily the main university we worked with was University College Dublin, and they looked at all of the training that we developed and established an academic credit level for each of the courses that we ran. Sorry, next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit more about those courses in a second, but the aims of ECTEG are very clear, and it's supporting activities to harmonise cybercrime training across borders, sharing knowledge, expertise, promoting standardisation of methods and harmonisation of training. And I think going back to what Kay was talking about earlier, in terms of the reliability of electronic evidence, one of the key features that we felt was that if people in different countries comply with the same standards around electronic evidence and they have the same opportunities for training on electronic evidence, then there will be a consistency and a greater likelihood that evidence will be admissible even if it was transferred across international borders. Next slide, please. Clearly, and again, I'm not going to read this, but it's there for anybody who wants to look at it afterwards. The collaboration aspect was crucial with industry and also academia, as well as trying to provide support for international organisations. And I think it's worthy of mention Interpol in that case. And if Jacob is still online, of course, he'll recognise that he came with us and was one of our trainers on one of the courses that we ran for Interpol, delivering these European level courses that have been developed. Yeah, okay, I'll see you're still there, Jacob, thank you. Next slide, please. So here's a list of some of the courses. Now, it's what's right to say is that when we started out with this program, what we wanted to do was make the training courses freely available to law enforcement anywhere in the world, in fact. We weren't looking to get any credit for doing it, but what we felt was that having established the training courses themselves, having got the credit worthiness, and that's important in terms of transfer of credit between countries, between academic institutions, according to the Bologna Agreement. And we wanted to do as much as we could and give those courses away freely to law enforcement. And they are freely available to law enforcement at any time. And we went through a process. All of the training, or some of the training courses there, they're very much based around investigations and/or forensic examination. And you can see the type of course there. Again, I'm not going to read it out as a list, but they're all relevant to people involved in investigation work. That's the first lot of courses. If you could go to the next one, please. Next slide. You'll see again there are more. Currently there are 16 courses that are available for any law enforcement organisation to have anywhere in the world. There will be 3 more courses coming online. If I remember correctly, they're on the next slide. The Mac forensics, solid state disk forensics, and advanced mobile device forensics. It's worth mentioning that this just isn't one country that's been leading on this. Courses, what we tend to do is we apply for European funding, which requires a lead organisation, and typically in the past that's been UK, Ireland, Germany, and also Europol themselves. So we try and even out the work. Now, of course, having 16, soon to be 19 courses, one of the key issues is how on earth do you keep them up to date? And that's where ECTEG comes in. What ECTEG does, it manages these training courses, it manages the update process and the upgrade process for these courses. And as we speak, a number of them are actually being transferred into e-learning products as well, so that they can work even wider. And of course, the next question is the issue of language. ECTEG is it's a program that's run in English language. The training courses initially are developed in English language, but many of them have been translated. For example, we met yesterday, and the Turkish delegation were at ECTEG, and they informed us that they've translated all of these courses into Turkish, taking into account local requirements, local procedural differences, and they now deliver those to their investigators in Turkey. The National Police in Spain, they took the material, they translated many of the courses into Spanish in order to support their training programs that they were running in South American countries, the Spanish-speaking South American countries. I think also importantly, and I'll mention this in the next presentation, but importantly, one of the partners in the program is Portugal. They have translated some of the courses into Portuguese and delivered those for training in that country as well. Whether they've shared that with other Portuguese-speaking countries, I'm not aware of. So it's quite a long and big process, and if I'm perfectly honest, it has relied upon the commitment of individuals over a long number of years, and unfortunately that is the case in many of these things. Many of us that have been doing this have got lots of grey hair, and you know, it's good to see some of the younger people coming along to take over when those of us that are near that age are getting around to retirement. So ECTEG as a group, I think it's quite effective. We get a lot of traction with international organisations, but the key message that I wanted to give for here is that these courses are freely available. They're not the only courses. There are courses that undoubtedly will be more suitable, but they are there, and you know, in line with what I said before, you know, let's not try reinventing the wheel when it's not necessary. So that's briefly ECTEG. Hopefully that's the last slide, Russ. If you can just, or whoever's doing it, go on to the last one. Okay, that's the website. If you want to go onto the website, have a look. There is a link there to make an application for the training material as well. It is a bit of a process because we want to make sure that, well, two things really. We want to make sure that people don't just take this stuff and use it and sell it commercially. And unfortunately, about 3 years ago, we did have an incident where somebody advertised one of our courses on their website and they were charging a lot of money for it. But the other reason is so that as the courses are updated, you can also get the new course material as well as the old course material. So that's a brief run through of ECTEG, and I hope that's been useful. I'm happy to take any question at any time, whether it's now or whether it's a bit later on towards the end. So if you feel the need to ask something urgently, please feel free to do so. Okay, so that's the end of the first presentation. Is there any chance of putting the two-centre one up now, which is sequentially, I think, is the right thing to do? Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, this next presentation, it is quite closely linked to the previous one. This is about a project called Two-Centre, and it's not actually about two centres. The two is in relation to the C's, but it's caused some confusion over the 3 years of the project. It's actually Cybercrime Centres of Excellence Network for Training, Research and Education. And although the words may not seem to be in the right order, again, we were conscious we wanted an acronym with vowels in a place that the acronym made some sense. This is a project that ran from 2010 and finished last month, actually, in September. And it was look at building this collaborative model for capacity building against cybercrime. And key components, again, as we often hear and we heard of in ECTEG, law enforcement. And when I talk about law enforcement, I mean the wider law enforcement or in fact the criminal justice community. And I heard mention earlier on about the need for training for judges and prosecutors, and I absolutely agree with that. I've been doing some work recently in the Balkans countries of former Yugoslavia, and also in Eastern Partnership countries, which is some of the former Russian states. And what's absolutely clear is that the law enforcement community tends to find its own solutions and has a number of resources available to it, whereas the judiciary and the prosecution services are falling way behind. I'll mention a little bit more about that in the last part of the presentation. So, you know, I reinforce the view that it's important to have all of these people in the same playing field. Next slide, please. So, this is just a description of what TwoCentre is. It's an embryonic network of national centres, and that's a key point to say that. And each national centre should be a cooperative effort between the three parties that I've already mentioned. And you'll see there that some of the benefits that were accrued are the academically accredited training, research and tool development. And we'll come on to that. I've got the website up there, and you can feel quite free to go and look at some of the work that's been done. It would take probably 2 hours to do justice to each of the elements that's happening. But I just wanted to give you some sort of overview of the philosophy behind this, the thinking behind it, and to show that in fact it can work. And it's not restricted to a particular geographical region of the world either. It can be adapted to meet local needs. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. That's just a placeholder. Okay. This is. I put this up just to show that the link between this and the previous project. And what I'll say about this is, I mentioned before about all the training that had been developed. And what happened in about 2008, we reached a stage where we realised that the number of courses that were being developed and the number of updates that were going to be required was beyond the capability of that small group of people who met twice a year in The Hague to deal with. And so we felt that we needed another solution. And one of the potential solutions was to examine the possibility of creating this network of centres of excellence that then could take responsibility as national centres for work in developing new training courses, upgrading existing courses, and also conducting research and developing tools for the law enforcement community. And when I talk about tools for the law enforcement community, we very much had in mind here those countries that were developing their response to cybercrime and didn't have much money. I know that now is pretty much every country, but in those days there were the rich and the not so rich countries. So what was important to us was to recognise that alongside the training courses that we were giving away for free, there needed to be the ability for countries or investigators within countries to be able to conduct effective investigations within the bounds of the standards for digital evidence that we spoke about. And so development of free or low-cost tools to support countries in this was felt also to be very important. And there are some tools that come out of this TwoCentre project that will be made available to particularly to the law enforcement community, and even a follow-up project called the Free Tool Project that's being run out of University College Dublin that takes that even one stage further. So these are predominantly forensic tools, but under a broader umbrella. So this is the sort of structure and how we got to where we were in 2008. So next slide, please. Okay. What happened when the decision was made that we needed to look beyond the ECTEG group, even though it was in another name then? There was a study commissioned actually by the three partner organisations, by industry, by academia, by law enforcement, to examine the potential to see how we could deliver long-term, sustainable, standards-based training to cybercrime personnel. And where we say cybercrime personnel there, we looked also beyond just the law enforcement community. Because for years the law enforcement community has tried to tell industry that you need to do things in a particular way, but then hasn't provided the ability for private sector and other organisations to receive training to enable them to comply with the legal standards in countries. So we felt that it was important to extend beyond that. You'll see on there that I was one of the authors of that study, along with Cormac Callanan, who is an industry member from Ireland. Again, that report is available on the Two Centre website. It's been sitting there for some time. I think in terms of structure of the suggestions for national centres, you may be interested in reading it. I often say to people that if you can't sleep at night, read the report. It will certainly help, but hopefully it's a little bit more use than that. Anyway, next slide, please. Okay, these are just some of the recommendations out of the report, and that really has led to where we are today. What was clear was that it was important that that countries did develop their own capability. The collaboration between the different players was important, and the three S's, if you like: sustainable, scalable, standards-based opportunities for knowledge and education. And the other key word in there is measurable. One of the key things that we felt was that, there are too many, I would say, companies that develop their own tools and sell their training alongside it that are very keen just to get the tool out there and don't really give too much credence to the level of ability of individuals. And very often don't have any assessment process in their training. That's not how we work. All of our training is assessed, and we also believe that people will fail sometimes. Not everybody can always pass, and we've often said that actually failure is a sign of success in that context. So. The centres, it was looking at each centre being located in a learning organisation, and we put it that way because it could have been in a police academy, it could be in a university, it could be in an industry learning organisation as well. But what we felt was that it was key that it was hosted within an organisation that had the ability to deliver the needs and requirements in terms of learning. Next slide, please. Okay, so this in broad terms is what we looked at in terms of the structure of a national centre, but it would be the national law enforcement, national industry, national learning organisations, and other national organisations that may be appropriate. And then there will be a link into the network that we were hoping to create under this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so where were we? We did make a bid for funding. The budget for this was about €2.7 million, which was a substantial budget, but there was a substantial amount of work. There were already two national centres that were working very, very closely as collaborations between the three partners, and they were Ireland and France. And it was felt important that those national centres were allowed to further develop and also to develop product within the project phase, because what we didn't want was to encourage countries to join but not have products at the end of it which we could share with each other and share with the broader community. And part of that was a network coordination centre, and actually my role in that was as the law enforcement coordinator. So I was chasing up people and encouraging them to think about working together with academia and industry. And my colleague was the industry coordinator, and his job was to do precisely the same with industry. So we felt that it was necessary to have some form of coordination function. Next slide, please. Okay, there's just a little bit about UCD. Again, I'm not going to go through this. I felt that if I put more information in the slides, you could, if anybody wants to, they can come back and look at that. But that's just some of the activities of UCD, the master's degree that they run, and just sort of rounding off the ECTEG training thing that one of the things that we wanted was not only individual academic courses, but we also ran a master's program, funded master's program for the students from the European Union countries over a 2-year period running from 2009 to 2011. So those training courses were moulded into a master's program, obviously with further academic rigour attached to them and academic requirements to meet the standards for a master's program. But the training courses did go there. UCD were the organisation that, sorry, the university that moderated, and they still run their own master's degree now for law enforcement and also for the private sector. So it's just some of the work that UCD do. Next slide, please. The next partner was the French National Centre of Excellence, which was a partnership between the Gendarmerie, the National Police, and also Université de Technologie de Troyes. They have for a number of years run a technical training program specifically for the Gendarmerie, but more latterly for the police as well. And so they were prepared to participate in the project. Next slide, please. We then looked at the expansion of the network. How would that grow in the 2 years of the project? How would we move from 2 national centres to more than 2? And the main idea was to create a long-term sustainable network in the subject areas that we've already discussed. And what we felt there, in addition to people taking responsibility for specific aspects of training where they have an expertise, that it was a really good platform for collaborative research and tool development as well. So, for example, University A in one country may look at developing a set of forensic tools which could then be looked at and validated by other universities within the network and added to. Of course, a key aspect of that is keeping those up to date, the maintenance program for those if they're going to be low or no cost. So that was another key feature of this program. Next slide, please. Well, this again is the link between the network and also ECTEG. ECTEG still is one of the key focal points, and we believe that ECTEG is one of the drivers behind the opportunities for work by the universities. I often hear universities often say, we've got loads of postgraduate students who want research subjects, and you've got the police who say, we really want research into aspects of criminality or aspects of tool development, and the two don't meet together, and so we wanted to knock their heads together and get them to work, and it's worked reasonably well. But the key for us was ensuring that the law enforcement focus wasn't lost, and so that's why ECTEG is seen as a key organisation, to avoid the university just going off and do their university stuff and forgetting that actually fighting cybercrime is one of the key objectives. So we wanted to make sure that the law enforcement focus is at the front of the activity around these centres. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a sort of structure of how we saw the network working, with the national centres feeding into a network coordination node that would take the responsibility for administration and for other activities, looking for funding opportunities, looking to increase partnerships, and having a sort of network focus, a coordination focus that will keep this thing going into the future. I have to say that the project has finished and there wasn't an agreement about how this should actually be done, and so EC3, which is the new European Cybercrime Centre set up at Europol, they've agreed to what I would call a light-handed coordination function, and they're providing space on the network for us to upload courses and to share information about activities and tools. But there isn't that sort of proactive coordination that we felt was necessary in order to keep the focus of the centres and to encourage them to continue working together. Next slide, please. And the next one. Yeah, okay. So the new centres of excellence, in addition to France and Ireland, during the 2 years of the project, there are now national centres in Belgium, Estonia, Czech Republic, England, Greece, Romania, Spain, Germany, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Portugal and Lithuania. So, another dozen, so we're up to 14. And perhaps I should make the point, I did have a bet at the beginning of this as to how many centres we would have with a colonel from the French Gendarmerie, and he still owes me a very, very good bottle of Margaux, which I will collect one day for winning the bet. But we also have expressions of interest from more than 20 other countries in participating. I think it's important to say at this time that the other way that we looked at this was that it may be that an individual country won't have the necessity to develop its own capability, but that in collaboration with other countries in the region, particularly those where there is a common language, there is the capability to create regional centres rather than national centres. And that still is something that we're very focused on, and I've been having discussions in other fora about how that could work. So I think in 2 years to get from 2 to 14 has been reasonably successful. And most of these have applied for funding through the European Commission, which strongly supported the concept of national centres of excellence as the way forward, and continue to do so. And so we envisage that other countries will continue to be created, to create national centres, and that they will work with one or more of the other partners that already exist in order to help them do that. Okay, so that's where we are with that. I did cut down a lot of slides out of some of these presentations. I'm not sure if you can see that. Actually, the website is hidden here. It is actually 2centre.eu, so the number 2 and then centre, spelled the English way, not the American way, so it's centre.eu. It may be that it's just only my screen where I can't see the whole slide. So thanks very much for that, and if we move on to, can we move on to the final presentation, which is about the Council of Europe Electronic Evidence Guide.
Nigel, while we're loading that, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to turn the volume up a bit. Okay.
Presentation. Number 1, we, speaking on behalf of the DEFC, we want to go on that list as one of the international sites. That's the first part. Second part is in 3 weeks we're going to see the announcement of the Horizon 2020 program, the new European framework for research and innovation. I want to express on behalf of the IC4MF consortium our desire to work together on this as a team in the submissions with the European Union. At the same time, within that program, there are dedicated programs of projects between the European Union and Brazil, the European Union and Israel and Brazil, the European Union, China, and Brazil. So through all of those and through our consortium, I envision that we will submit the proposals to carry forward this work. So for all of the ICMF partners that are on here, listen closely. You'll get correspondence from me that says I need your help to write the proposal for this. There's too much opportunity for us to obtain the funding that we need to make our combined projects successful. So this is a very big component. We have a conference that's coming up at the end of this month that's only for law enforcement, defense, and the intelligence community. It is not a public conference. And in that conference, we will summarize the actual problems, not the masqueraded and the public stated problems. We're going to talk in the real sense of these are the real problems. And then we will change that to the public version and then direct our academic partners and the research activities of the students as necessary to work on those topics. So your presentation and the materials that you've had in the last 2 slides are very applicable to this community at large. The next component that you're going to talk about is the component that really focuses on the material and the technology that we'll be able to use in the Forensic Center of Excellence that's provided by COE. So we look forward to this, and I'll turn this back to you, Nigel. We can take other comments when you're finished with the presentation.